heading northbound on Dragonfire Crossing. Have you got that roadblock set up? We're coming in at you at about 100 miles an hour.
Before it became a ghost on four wheels, this car was never meant to live at all. In the mid-1980s, while Ferrari and Lamborghini were fighting for poster glory, Dodge quietly built something that looked like it had slipped through a crack in time. Sleek, silent, and impossibly fast, it wasn't designed for movie screens. It was built to pace real race cars, yet fate had other plans. When the Wraith hit theaters in 1986, this machine stole the spotlight, becoming the most mysterious car Hollywood ever filmed. But how did a prototype meant for indie tracks end up roaring through a supernatural revenge movie? Why was it faster than Ferraris, yet never sold to the public? And why do people still swear they've seen it, long after it was locked away in a museum vault? This is the untold resurrection of a machine born for speed, but remembered as a ghost. Welcome to the story of the Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor and the 20 weird facts that turned it from a forgotten prototype into an immortal legend. Number 20. Born to race, not to film. Long before Hollywood ever pointed a camera at it, the Dodge M4S had a very different destiny. It wasn't meant to chase villains or explode in desert chases. It was meant to lead race cars. In the early 80s, Dodge engineers were commissioned to build a pace car that could outrun Indy machines on straightaways, something capable of exceeding 200 mph and surviving it. What they created was a piece of rolling aerospace engineering, lightweight, aerodynamic, and brutally fast. They called it M4S, short for mid-engine four-cylinder sport, a title that hinted at precision rather than power. But the irony was brutal. This pace car prototype, built to guide real racers, never got to see the track. Instead, it was locked away after a few tests, waiting in silence until Hollywood came knocking. When the Wraith needed a car that looked like it came from another world, Dodge opened the vault and unknowingly unleashed a legend. Number 19. The name that predicted its future. M4S. 3 letters and a single digit that read like a code from the future. In an era when Detroit still worshipped V8 engines and cubic inches, Dodge dared to design something radical, a 4-cylinder supercar. The M stood for mid-engine, meaning the power plant sat behind the driver for perfect balance. 4S meant 4-cylinder sport, heresy to muscle car purists, but a declaration of engineering rebellion. That layout gave the M4S razor-sharp handling, nearly perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and the sleek wedge shape that would define its identity. Every component was positioned for speed, every curve carved by science. Ironically, those very letters, symbols of innovation, also marked its doom. The world wasn't ready for a 4-cylinder American supercar, so instead of revolutionizing Detroit, the M4S became a misunderstood alien, waiting for the silver screen to understand its language. Number 18. The 440 horsepower miracle. At the heart of this phantom beat a 2.2-liter twin-turbocharged 4-cylinder engine built with a Cosworth head and tuned to deliver 440 horsepower. Let that sink in. 440 HP from an engine smaller than one in today's compact sedans. In 1986, Ferrari's flagship Testarossa made 390 HP from 12 cylinders. Dodge had achieved the impossible. Each turbocharger was sized for minimal lag and maximum thrust. Their combined scream unlike anything else on the road. Part turbine, part banshee. Mechanics said opening the hood felt like staring into a spaceship. Polished tubes, double intercoolers, and heat shields glowing faint orange. The boost was so extreme that ordinary gaskets couldn't survive. Dodge used aircraft-grade materials to keep it from tearing itself apart. The result was a car that didn't just accelerate, it detonated forward. A mechanical paradox that redefined what American engineering could dare to build. Number 17. Outrunning Ferrari and fate. When test drivers first timed the M4S, no one believed the numbers. 0 to 60 in just 4.1 seconds, a verified top speed of 194.8 miles per hour. In 1986, that wasn't just fast, it was impossible. Ferrari's Testarossa took 5.2 seconds to reach 60. Porsche's 911 Turbo hit it in 5 flat, and Lamborghini's Countach barely managed 4.8. The M4S, with half their cylinders, was blowing them away. But what really stunned engineers wasn't the acceleration, it was the calm. Even at 109 km/h, the car stayed planted, slicing through the air without a hint of lift. It didn't drive, one tester said. It flew, but perfectly level. The story goes that some journalists refused to publish the results, thinking Dodge had faked them. So the team ran the test again. Same result, same ghostly silence as it disappeared down the straight. The M4S didn't just outrun Ferraris, it outran disbelief itself. Number 16, sculpted by the wind. To reach those impossible speeds, Dodge's engineers didn't rely on brute force. They turned to the wind itself. The M4S's aerodynamic drag coefficient measured a jaw-dropping E.236, smoother than a modern Prius 3 decades later. Every curve, vent, and surface was born inside a wind tunnel, tested through thousands of smoke trail sessions. Engineers spent over 1,000 hours chasing the perfect balance between downforce and slipperiness. They reshaped the nose by millimeters, adjusted the roofline, even redesigned the side mirrors for less drag. The underbody was completely flat, and the rear diffuser actually worked, something most supercars of the time could only pretend to have. When the final prototype rolled out, it looked less like a car and more like an aircraft that had shed its wings. The air didn't fight it. It caressed it. Number 15, the color that lied. Everyone remembers the Wraith's car as pitch black, a rolling shadow gliding through the desert night. But the truth is stranger. The real M4S was painted a layered root beer pearl, a deep metallic brown laced with gold and purple flakes. Under sunlight, it shimmered bronze. Under shade, it turned nearly black. The cinematographer hated it. The film needed pure black for menace, not copper elegance. But repainting the car would have delayed production, so the crew worked around it, using lighting tricks, night shoots, and tight framing to make the car look darker than it was. Ironically, that complex pearl paint cost more than the respray they never did. Fans who've seen the car in person say the real color is mesmerizing, like molten metal caught between night and dawn. The car didn't just look alive on screen, it was alive, constantly changing with the light. Number 14, 6 cars, 1 ghost. Hollywood loves illusions, and the Wraith was no exception. For the film, 6 versions of the Interceptor were built, each one a shadow of the original. 2 were fully functional prototypes, powered by real engines and capable of blistering speed. The other 4 were hollow shells made for destruction, fiberglass bodies mounted on simple frames, their fate sealed before the cameras even rolled. Each was designed for a specific death, one for explosions, one for rollovers, one for impact, and a spare. The transition between them was movie magic. The real car would sprint across the desert, then a stunt shell would take the hit. To audiences, it looked seamless. But on set, the crew felt the weight of every sacrifice. They were destroying copies of a one-of-a-kind machine. By the end of filming, only one true M4S remained untouched, the ghost that survived its own cinematic apocalypse. Number 13, the sound of speed. When the Wraith hit theaters, audiences were hypnotized by the car's scream, a metallic howl that sounded half mechanical, half supernatural. But that sound was an illusion too. The real M4S's turbocharged engine made a sharp, turbine-like hiss, too high-pitched for the film's tone. The replicas, on the other hand, ran on small-block Chevy V8s, their throaty growl completely different. To fix it, the sound team recorded hours of the genuine car revving through its gears, then mixed and warped the audio to make it more menacing. What we hear in the film is a hybrid creature, part real boost, part movie monster. Even its idling tone was tweaked to sound like breathing, slow, rhythmic, alive. When you realize the car was both mechanical and mythic, the name Wraith, a spirit between worlds, suddenly makes perfect sense. Number 12, quarter-mile madness. The M4S wasn't just fast in theory, it was brutal in practice. On the drag strip, the car could tear through the quarter mile in the high 12-second range, trapping around 115 miles. For a 4-cylinder prototype in 1986, that bordered on witchcraft. The turbos didn't spool, they detonated, hitting full boost around 3,000 RPM. Below that, it purred. Above it, it screamed. Drivers said the power delivery felt like a punch from a freight train. If you weren't ready, one mechanic joked, it'd rearrange your organs. Perfect runs required perfect timing. One missed shift, and your quarter mile jumped into the 13s. But when everything clicked, the M4S was unstoppable. Watching it launch was like witnessing controlled chaos, an engineered explosion disguised as elegance. Number 11, designed like a fighter jet. The M4S didn't just look aerodynamic. It was aerodynamic down to the millimeter. Its design philosophy borrowed more from fighter jets than from cars. Every panel, vent, and curve had a job to do. Engineers used smoke trails in wind tunnels to map airflow, watching the eddies curl and vanish across the surface. When air broke away in unexpected spots, they reshaped the body by hand, shaving, sanding, testing again. Even the rear glass was adjusted in tiny increments to prevent turbulence. The goal wasn't to make it beautiful. Beauty was the byproduct of function. From the side, the M4S looked like a stealth aircraft that had crash-landed on 4 wheels. It didn't fight air, it manipulated it, bending invisible currents to its will. At full speed, the car seemed less to drive through the air than within it, a pilotless jet slicing the horizon. Number 10, built with race-bred DNA. Hidden beneath the sculpted shell was a chassis straight out of a race program. Chrysler didn't build the M4S like a concept car, they built it like a competition machine. The frame was a tubular steel structure, lightweight but rigid. Suspension arms were adjustable, coilovers hand-tuned. The steering rack came directly from open-wheel racing. Even the pedal box was movable for different drivers, just like in professional race cars. Inside, creature comforts didn't exist. No power steering, no insulation, just a thin shell between the driver and the fury beneath. There were whispers that Chrysler had considered entering the car into IMSA racing before the project was shelved. If that had happened, the M4S might have become America's answer to Porsche's 962, a homegrown Le Mans fighter that never got its war. Instead, it remained a weapon without a battlefield. Number 9, weightless power. Speed doesn't just come from horsepower, it comes from restraint. The M4S tipped the scales at only 2,550 pounds, lighter than most sports cars of its era by hundreds. That weight savings came from obsession. The body was fiberglass, the suspension arms aluminum, the wheels magnesium, and even the bolts were titanium. Nothing was overbuilt. Nothing was wasted. The result was a power-to-weight ratio that rivaled exotics costing 10 times as much. With 440 horsepower pushing just over a ton of mass, the car felt like it was inhaling the road. One engineer described it perfectly. You didn't drive the M4S, you wore it. Every vibration, every pulse of the turbos translated directly through the chassis. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't meant to be. It was raw, stripped-down purity, the closest thing Detroit ever built to a mechanical soul. Number 8, smart before smart cars. In an age when most cars still relied on carburetors, the M4S ran on brainpower. Beneath its twin-turbo madness hid one of Chrysler's earliest electronic management systems, a Bosch injection setup capable of reading multiple sensors and adjusting fuel and timing in real time. It wasn't artificial intelligence, but for 1986, it might as well have been. The system could compensate for heat, altitude, and even boost pressure automatically. If turbo pressure climbed too high, it would momentarily cut fuel to protect the engine, a primitive form of computer-controlled safety long before ECU became a buzzword. Engineers joked that the M4S was smarter than the people driving it. In an era obsessed with muscle and displacement, this car whispered the future, speed born not from size but from software. Number 7, the Forbidden Exhibit. After the Wraith wrapped production, Chrysler took back its creation, too valuable, too experimental to leave in Hollywood's hands. The surviving M4S was placed inside the Walter P. Chrysler Museum behind ropes and glass, where it sat for decades like an artifact from another world. Visitors would press their faces to the barrier, staring at a car they could never touch, a ghost they could only photograph. It became legend by absence. The longer it stayed hidden, the more stories grew around it. Secret tests, hidden prototypes, rumors of a second car that disappeared. Chrysler occasionally brought it out for anniversaries, and every time the whispers returned, could this thing still run? The M4S didn't just live in a museum, it haunted it. Number 6, the indestructible stunt monsters. While the real M4S rested under lock and key, its cinematic doubles took the hits. The stunt versions were monsters built from off-road buggy frames, tubular steel skeletons designed to absorb abuse. These beasts could jump, crash, roll, and keep going. Massive shocks, long travel suspension, and good old small block Chevy V8s powered them through every stunt sequence. They were Frankenstein machines, crude, loud, and nearly unkillable. Between takes, the crew patched fiberglass panels, hammered frames back into shape, and sent them roaring again. One stunt driver later admitted he preferred the fake ones. You could beat them to death, and they'd still start. On screen, those indestructible imposters sold the illusion that the Interceptor was invincible. In truth, it was, just not for the reasons anyone expected. Number 5. The real-life tragedy. No Hollywood legend comes without a shadow. During the filming of The Wraith, tragedy struck when camera operator Bruce Ingram was killed in a high-speed accident. The camera car lost control and veered off the road during a chase scene. He was only 31. The production halted for days, shaken to its core. What had been a supernatural revenge story on screen suddenly became a very real one behind the scenes. Crew members later described the eerie silence that followed every take afterward. Some swore the desert felt different, as if the movie had awakened something it couldn't put back to sleep. The film was quietly dedicated to Bruce's memory, but most viewers never noticed the line in the credits. The irony was bitter. A movie about death and resurrection had claimed a life of its own. And from that moment, the Wraith's Interceptor stopped being just a prop. It became an omen. Number 4. How it rebuilt itself. One of the Wraith's most mesmerizing effects was the car's supernatural ability to rebuild itself after being destroyed, long before CGI existed. The crew pulled off the illusion using nothing but patience and precision. They filmed 2 identical shots, one with a wrecked shell, another with a pristine car. Same position, same lighting, same tire angle. Then, in the editing room, they cut between the 2. The result was hauntingly seamless. Viewers swore the car was regenerating on screen. In reality, it was hours of manual setup, measuring tire tracks, adjusting reflections, waiting for the light to match. Each regeneration was a resurrection ritual. The car wasn't just being repaired, it was being reborn. And the effect worked so well that even today, audiences mistake it for early CGI, but it wasn't technology. It was movie magic, old-school sorcery at 24 frames per second. Number 3. The supercar Detroit buried. Here's the cruelest twist of all. Chrysler had built a world-class supercar and then buried it. Despite the hype, the M4S never reached production. The cost was astronomical, the timing disastrous. Chrysler needed minivans, not million-dollar prototypes. Executives loved it, but the accountants didn't. "We built the future," one engineer said, and the future wasn't affordable. Had it gone into production, the M4S could have rewritten automotive history. Imagine a 440 horsepower mid-engine Dodge hitting showrooms in 1987. It would have predated the McLaren F1 by years. Instead, the car vanished into storage, its innovations scattered across later projects like the Dodge Viper. The M4S proved Detroit could build supercars. It just chose not to. Number 2. The Internet Resurrection. For decades, the M4S was a myth, a whisper among car enthusiasts and a blurry photo in old magazines. Then YouTube came along, and suddenly, the ghost returned. Clips of the Wraith went viral, fan theories exploded, and a new generation became obsessed with the mysterious black car that never existed in showrooms. Soon, replica projects began to appear. Some fans built theirs on Pontiac Fieros or Toyota MR2s. Others started from scratch with fiberglass molds traced from screenshots. Forums filled with blueprints, 3D scans, and midnight debates about paint formulas. One builder even claimed his replica hit 500 horsepower and weighed less than the original. For the first time, the legend was no longer locked behind glass. It was reborn in garages around the world. The Wraith had returned, not as a movie prop, but as a community's shared obsession. Number 1. The ghost that still haunts Hollywood. Nearly 40 years later, the M4S remains untouchable, a phantom that outlived its creators. Even now, modern supercars struggle to match its drag coefficient, its power-to-weight ratio, or the mystique surrounding its name. It was a car too advanced for its decade, too ambitious for its company, and too perfect for its world. The Wraith's Interceptor didn't just chase villains, it chased immortality. It came from Detroit's wind tunnels, roared across Hollywood's desert, and then vanished into legend. Some machines are built to last, others are built to haunt. And somewhere, In the low hum of a distant engine, you can still hear it. The ghost of speed, the echo of the M4S. Before we close the file on this legend, here's one last truth. The Wraith's Turbo Interceptor wasn't just a car, it was a statement. A message from engineers who dared to build something nobody asked for and everyone would one day dream of. It defied categories, broke expectations, and blurred the line between science and art. The M4S proved that brilliance doesn't always lead to success. Sometimes it leads to myth. It showed what happens when creativity outpaces commerce, when vision burns brighter than logic. And even though it never reached production, it reached immortality instead. So the next time you hear a turbo spool or see headlights cut through desert fog, remember the car that came too soon and vanished too fast. The Dodge M4S Turbo Interceptor, the machine that Hollywood borrowed, destiny rejected, and time could never bury.